Hi, I'm Ren. I'm an engineer at Electric Capital, and today we have 20 minutes to talk about fighting fragmentation and why Bitcoin UX needs a level up. There's a lot of frustration kind of within the crypto space around UX, around trading runes, but maybe as a way to start, we can have quick 30-second introductions going alphabetically. First Kevin, and then Nick, and then Mark.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Kevin Kim. I'm staff product manager at Phantom. I've been here for 2 years. We launched Bitcoin at the end of Bitcoin ordinals and BRC20 support at the end of last year. And yeah, we've learned a lot along the way. So excited to chat about Bitcoin UX.
I'm gonna give you a little troll. My N comes before M for Mark. No, I'm just kidding. But Nick Sonato, co-founder of Gamma.io. We're a creator launchpad and marketplace for Bitcoin and for stacks, primarily focused on art.
Hey all, I'm Mark Hendrickson. I'm the general manager of Leather. We were the original wallet for the Stacks ecosystem several years ago, and these days we're a general Bitcoin Web3 wallet supporting ordinals, stamps, runes, all sorts of things on the L1 side as well.
Great. Maybe a good place to start to ease folks into the conversation. What are some of the UX challenges of building in crypto broadly?
Yeah, I can jump in here. I think all of us in crypto have our eyes fundamentally on what's going on the protocol level. So what blockchain engineers are up to. And so if you're working on front-end applications like a wallet, you're trying to plan features so they can launch around the same time that protocol developments take place. We're all looking to leverage what's going on at the lower level as soon as possible. And I think that sort of rush to be out as with front-end user experiences as soon as protocols support new functionality creates a very central challenge because we're not giving ourselves a lot of time to really allow those protocol developments to mature before we actually ship our first, second, third version of functionality around them. So I think that's sort of a great thing about crypto in the sense that we're very experimental. But I think there's such a draw towards shipping as soon as you can, as fast as you can in crypto. And I think UX details often take a backseat to that. And I think also because crypto is full of very technically savvy users, a lot of those UX challenges or sort of downsides, if you will, are sort of forgiven and not later prioritized.
Yeah, I can jump in next. I think like there's to piggyback off of something Mark said, like given there are a lot of technical people, in the space, and I think even some people who are maybe like on the edges and might not be as technical, but because they are interested in, maybe speculative assets or something, and there's like a profit potential, there's really like this additional motivation that kind of gives platforms and apps and whatnot like a little bit of a free pass to not focus on those things, because people are like just willing to like do whatever it takes to achieve their end goal, and I think these users are probably also not the type to necessarily speak up about, hey, I'm having troubles with this, or and so there's maybe like a little bit less of the traditional like feedback cycle that you can use to inform product improvements and UX improvements. So I do think there's a little bit of the nature of that, just like, by virtue of the audience and user base that we have. And I think that's like the exact reason why we as builders need to really like go above and beyond what we think, is the bare minimum, because we're probably not getting the same level of like feedback that you would normally get, in a product life cycle. So I think that's definitely like one piece. And then I think another, like just to give a couple examples that I'm sure everyone is familiar of, the actual process of I'm glad there's two wallets up on stage that I can beg for some help on, like that initial process of setting up a wallet and, hey, go in a dark corner and don't let anyone near you and write down these words and never share them with anyone ever and put them in a safe. And like, if you lose them and all of your money is gone forever, like, it's just like inherently a very scary thing. And it's not, it's kind of like the antithesis of the typical onboarding process for, what you want to have onboarding to a new product of any kind. And then, it doesn't just end at the wallet. After the wallet, now you actually need funds, and funds probably require, going through maybe a centralized exchange that requires a multi-day KYC process, or transfers from your bank, which take time to settle, or maybe your bank just outright declines your ability to purchase crypto because, they're against it from a principled perspective or something. So like, I think these things are problems that like we all need to kind of rally around as a space and work through. And until we get through these things, I don't think we're going to be able to get to, the billion users that are often talked about.
Yeah, and then I'll just add on to what Nick and Mark said. I thought they made great points. So yeah, I think the basic concepts of things like seed phrases, private keys, losing your account, obviously that's a big challenge for people entering Web3. I think the concepts of immutability, you can't reverse your transactions or contact support like you can on a bank or credit card, or the concept of network fees. I've actually had Web2 friends who I asked to make a send on my behalf Venmo me for the network fees. So that's kind of hard to grasp for some people. And at a high level, as a wallet, I think the trade-off of over explaining and over educating versus opting for a simpler, cleaner experience. Like how far down the rabbit hole do you go on, oh, I'm gonna have the best tooltips in all of crypto, or I'm gonna have the best help center articles on how to explain what crypto is in the entire industry. And I think focusing specifically on one that I've seen a lot working on a wallet, which is scams and spam. This could apply to tokens, it could apply to collectibles, it could apply to dApps. For the Bitcoin ecosystem, on one hand, it might not be as much of a problem yet as it is on other chains due to high network fees. On the other hand, innovations like recursive inscriptions make mass ordinal airdrops a lot cheaper. And on Solana, we have a huge problem of scammy NFTs that have that have like links to like malicious sites that might like drain your wallet or capture personal information in the metadata. And I think things like that are even more dangerous when you have a dApp ecosystem where features like transaction simulations, like what Phantom has or MetaMask has, are like not really available on Bitcoin currently. So yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges and um, yeah, a lot of challenges, a lot of like danger for users as well. And the risk is, if you get drained or if you get scammed out of your money, are you going to return to the ecosystem? So we have a big responsibility on our shoulders.
Yeah, thank you. Those are all great points. To dive into Bitcoin specifically, a lot of the infrastructure is quite nascent today with respect to UX. What are some unique UX challenges of building on Bitcoin specifically, and what are aspects of BTC that builders coming from the EVM or SVM side might not be familiar with at all?
Yeah, well, I think if you're building on Bitcoin as an L1, obviously Bitcoin doesn't have robust native smart contracts. And so you have to build functionality in lieu of those. And I think what we've seen with ordinals in particular in the last year and with rooms as well is a reliance on off-chain indexers for the most part. And so as apps, you have to tap into these indexers to make sense of what's going on chain. And these indexers don't always line up. They're not always standardized. They lead to inconsistencies as far as the sort of UX that you're trying to deliver. And so I think that's an inherent just limitation to what's going on with the L1. And I think the reason why we have an interest in building on L2s like on Stacks is because there are smart contracts, and we hope long term that that's going to provide the same sort of functional benefit as you find elsewhere on other L1s, but with the security of Bitcoin. And so basically close sort of the gap there. I also say that just the UTXO model, when it comes to Bitcoin, causes a lot of hand wringing and there's a lot of detailed work where you have to make sure that you don't. I mean, with the UTXOs and things like ordinals, stamps, runes, there's this merging, if you will, of user funds, normal BTC user funds, with where you're trying to store data. You're trying to store inscriptions or other assets, and if you don't sort through that and make sure you're taking care of UTXOs in a very precise manner, very dire things can happen to user assets, and that's just something that's very unique to Bitcoin, given its UTXO model. And I think that's kind of the beautiful experimentational space that we've seen on Bitcoin as L1. That's why we've seen these new applications really come to life over the last year plus. But it's a very sort of strange way to actually build Web3 because you're combining things in a way that doesn't always stay consistent or error free.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the UTXO model because just for those of you who aren't familiar, UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. And I think like in layman's terms, you can think of it as stacks of Bitcoin that you have that make up your total Bitcoin balance. So you can think of it kind of like dollar bills that you would have in your wallet as compared to your bank account or even, Ethereum or Solana, which work on more of an account model where, you're really just debiting and crediting amounts of Bitcoin to your balance. So because you have these stacks of Bitcoin, there are some, like advantages to that. That's actually why we have something like ordinals, because you're able to track which specific stacks of Bitcoin. And to Mark's point, then you have to be careful with them, but you can segregate those and keep track of those. But there's a downside to this model in terms of fees. And in a high fee environment, there are sort of like invisible issues that users can run into. And it's kind of hard to know when is best to educate somebody on that. So to give a small example of this, let's say you are a creator on Gamma and you want to launch a very low cost collection, maybe like $1 or something per mint. So you're going to be receiving $1, and in this model, you're now receiving a bunch of dollar bills into your Bitcoin balance. Well, when fees are high, like right now, it might cost $4 to send that $1. And so you've actually like not really collected anything at all that is spendable. Or you have to wait until a low fee period where maybe it only costs, you know, uh, you know, a number of cents or $1 or something like that in order to then send that maybe to a centralized exchange to go to fiat or just to consolidate it into larger bills that are easier to manage in the future. So I think things like this are unique to Bitcoin and are really a challenge for us to work through as apps and as wallets and whatnot, because like at what point is the right time to educate somebody on that? It's hard to even know. If they've collected a bunch of them and they go to send that Bitcoin, they're just going to see that it costs $1,000 to send a transaction, and they're going to be like, why is this $1,000? I'm just trying to send $50. So yeah, I think I don't know that there's a perfect solution for that, but we'll have to work through it.
Yeah, a lot of great points again. I definitely agree on the UTXO point around UTXO management and UTXO splitting. As we could see from the Runes launch, it's such a abstract and confusing series of concepts to a new user. And wallets are either trying to abstract UTXOs away entirely or being way too specific about how they're changing. And if you don't split your UTXO correctly, then you've missed out on minting as much of your Pepe rune as you could have and lost out on money. Um, Definitely agree on the indexing as well. There's so many standards, whether it's like non-fungibles or fungibles on Bitcoin right now. And like you need to have amazing in-house on-chain indexing talent or ultra reliable third parties to do that for you. And the stakes are high. One error and you've burned a user's cartoon stick figure they've spent 50K on, and you're getting hammered on Twitter. So there's a lot at stake. But yeah, I mean, additional things I think include, longer confirmation times. Like for some of our users on Phantom, going from sub 1 second block times to waiting hours for your transaction to be entirely confirmed. That's creates a lot of fear and uncertainty. On network fees, when I was trying to buy runes on the day of launch, I was seeing like $3,000 network fees just to bridge over. And yeah, bridging difficulty as well, lack of like amazing options that are cheap, efficient, and decentralized. Um, I think a huge one also is Bitcoin address types. Like, what is nested SegWit versus native SegWit versus Taproot? Like, why does Cash App support some address types and Binance support others and Leather support others and Phantom support others? Why do they all look different? Can I send Bitcoin from one to the other? And do they all support inscriptions? Do they all support runes? I think there's just a lot of ambiguity there. And then, yeah, things like stat protection as well that I just kind of touched on with the indexing. Like, there's such high stakes to making sure certain rare and expensive satoshis of a user's Bitcoin, like protecting those over like other Bitcoin and making sure you're keeping track of them throughout the entire life cycle, and then also kind of hoping that the DApp is doing the same. Um, yeah, and I think maybe the final thing also is just even features that users consider pretty basic in the EVM or Solana world, like speed up and cancel, for example, when a transaction's already in flight to the mempool, is just a little more complicated to integrate within Bitcoin through things like the RBF protocol. So yeah, I think when the infrastructure is so different compared to some of these chains, these like faster and cheaper chains that have been popularized in this cycle and that people are using now, yeah, it creates a big jarring effect for users, and we're doing our best to work through that.
Yeah, Kevin, you brought up a great point around wallet address fragmentation, even just on the BTC L1 level. As more and more scaling solutions and L2 start to launch on BTC, how do we deal with this fragmentation, especially as this kind of like cross-chain modularity type of outcome and future of the world might be coming to Bitcoin over the coming like 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I can take that first. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of fragmentation within Bitcoin on address types. I feel like each wallet does things differently. So for example, some wallets have a notion of an address type like native SegWit to pay for an inscription, but you might receive it in your Taproot address, and those are the only settings the wallet allows. Like it's not more flexible. Then other wallets are super flexible and allow for any combination, but then sometimes it's even more confusing to the user because like they could start doing things like buying inscriptions on legacy. Marketplace A might support certain address types. Marketplace B might support every kind of address type. So yeah, I think we see a good amount of fragmentation there. Hopefully everyone will migrate to Taproot in the near future, and things like set protection and indexing and like different standards, like these things will like consolidate and settle down. I think within Bitcoin, yeah, there's quite a number of L2s, like stacks, like Merlin, many being funded or launching. I think right now it's a little hard to bridge between these or to L1 Bitcoin in general without centralized exchanges. And yeah, like I think just within L1 Bitcoin alone, there's at least 10 fungible token standards besides BRC20s, and that makes it harder for wallets and dApps to keep up. So yeah, I think there is quite an amount of fragmentation. I don't think this is bad in the near term, as people are exploring, people are building, people are experimenting. We're seeing what resonates with users and what doesn't. I think, for example, if you look at general chain fragmentation right now across Web3, um, there's been so much growth in ecosystems like Solana, ecosystems like Cosmos IBC, the move based chains are starting to grow. Company L2s like Base are thriving. Each ecosystem, I feel, has its own focus and flavor and developer base. So fragmentation is not necessarily bad, but yeah, it does make it a little difficult for the user to like understand what their opportunities are in terms of what they should buy, what they should own.
Got it.
I'll just
Thanks.
add, I think just to sort of build on something Kevin said there, some of these difficulties, they exacerbate each other. So I totally agree with this question of fragmentation of Bitcoin address types. And you have to figure out as a provider of an application or a wallet, which ones to support, how to label them. At the same time, because the indexers are not the most reliable, on one hand, you want to combine user activity onto just one address type so that the user has simplicity. On the other hand, you don't want to do that because you don't want the possibility that an indexer doesn't tell you that a particular SAT has an asset, so you might misspend it. And so I think we need to work through these challenges kind of one by one, but as we do, hopefully they sort of help unravel the other ones. And something in the back of our minds too is that with Bitcoin, you can have many different addresses generated per type per account for privacy purposes. And we've kind of the last year just not really thought about that as an ecosystem or sort of a sub ecosystem. But if longer term our users do demand privacy per address, that's going to add another complication to this, but could also be a benefit to using Web3 built on Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great points. I just want to end with a quick 30-second hot take on what UX pattern do you think exists today, but you think won't exist in the future, just to give the users out there kind of like an insight of the future to come.
I can jump in first to piggyback off something I said earlier. I think the idea of like seed phrases and like directly managing your private keys, I hope is something that gets abstracted away. I want to be very clear that doesn't mean I think we should move to a custodied solution, but there are really cool technologies like Web3 auth, for example, that use threshold signatures and really clever models of creating like a multi-factor essentially way of splitting up your private key so that even you as the user don't have to manage the key, but you still own your private key and you're really the only one that can recover it. So I think that's definitely what I hope to see.
Mark or Kevin?
Yeah, I think just going back to the question of UTXOs, I think we have to find a way to take the whole notion of UTXOs out of the user experience for the user. I just think that that's something that very early adopters will be willing to tolerate or even value when it comes to things like rare sets. But mainstream users are just going to trip themselves over this. So I think it's on us as wallet developers and app developers to find ways to accurately and gracefully manage UTXOs for the user and not have them encounter that as a concept.
Yeah, I think things that exist today but might not in the future. I think fragmentation of Bitcoin address types probably won't be as bad. Hopefully almost everyone is on Taproot or whatever the newest improvement is. And then I think also, right now we're seeing new standards and asset types being launched every month on Bitcoin L1. This will likely have settled down and consolidated. In terms of will still exist, I think there's going to be still a lot of L2s. I think there's just Bitcoin L2s. I think there's too many incentives. Network fees. People are just going to be less tolerant of network fees as time passes, and Bitcoin has so much mind share.
Great. Thank you so much for the time today and talking through how we might fight fragmentation on BTC and improve the UX for users.